We ask the questions. What is needed in the world?
Stefanie Schiffer is the founder and director of European Exchange, a Berlin-based organization committed to democratic development of Europe and its neighborhoods. Stefanie, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera channel, and thank you so much for taking time to speak to us now. Your organization is about to publish a major report on foreign observers and quote-unquote experts at the recent elections in Russia. Now, to start with, would you even consider the 2024 Russian presidential elections as being free and fair?
No, unfortunately, the elections can be called either free nor fair.
Why is that so?
There are several reasons for that. Let's start, I would say it's four main reasons. Let's start with the first. The first is the lack of competition. There's an election without choice. The people of Russia have been left without real choice. The background that the most strong competitors for the incumbent president have been prevented from running for the vote. And the strongest is for sure Alexei Navalny, who in 2012 ran for Moscow mayor, where he got 27%. He's a strong candidate, and he's a strong candidate. Would have been a strong candidate if he would not have prevented from running because of a criminal case. This was a criminal case back from years ago, which made him prevented him from running for the vote. And then he has been imprisoned, as we know, with Novichok. And during the elections themselves, he was already imprisoned after coming back to Russia. And as we know, 1 month before the elections, he came to death under unclear circumstances, but we have to be assessed as a consequence of his imprisonment, if not a murder in the prison. So the president has been running for vote without a real challenge. We have candidates who have been put for the vote, have been no real strong candidates, and they have been, some of them also prevented in the last minute from being registered. So the elections have been running without a real choice. This is the first reason, no competition. Second problem is with these elections that the President Putin had a disputable passive voting right. The passive voting right of Putin was reinforced or confirmed by a disputable change to the constitution. This change to the constitution has been done in a very strange way, and one has to say that after having been in office already since 1999, the country would have deserved, for sure, an open choice among different presidents or candidates. This is the passive voting right. Second problem. The third problem is that the elections have been taking place also on the annexed regions of Ukraine. So if a country is holding elections in an annexed country, neighbor country, where country is fighting an aggressive war, this is a really absolutely critical point, because these votes from the annexed Oblast, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, and also the Crimea have been accounted in the whole result. And we know from our colleagues and from researchers that there have been also Ukrainian citizens who have been forced to go to vote. So this is the third reason, and the fourth reason is a huge series of shortcomings, procedural shortcomings in the organization of elections. There have been online voting without any evidence of which are verifiable data. There was no media access for the different candidates who have been running still. And very problematic is that independent election observation was not allowed in the country. And independent election observers have been prevented from visiting the precincts and being on the spot.
Right. We'll be speaking more about foreign election observers especially from our region who took part monitoring the elections in Russia. But I wanted to ask you, to what extent does, you talked about the exclusion of genuine opposition candidates in these elections, but to what extent does the exclusion of these genuine opposition candidates from the electoral landscape in the context of the 2024 Russian presidential elections reflect a broader trend in the authoritarian entrenchment and manipulation of political pluralism in Russia?
Yeah, it's a problem that it's an imitation of an election. That's how the Independent Election Observation Organization Golos called it, an imitation of the election.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Imitation. So there's a central election commission, there are candidates, there is the precinct, there is the whole procedure of the election. It's called election, but the whole visibility of the election was held very low. People did not know about elections. It was no discussion about elections. It was the elections have been there, but there was not a real competition. There were no real candidates, and there was no real choice for the people. So the state prevents to be a democratic state, but de facto it's already a dictatorship, and people have no real opportunity neither to be elected nor to vote. And this is tricky. This is the idea of this imitation. So we have to be very much aware that not everywhere there is a written election. It is an election, but it is the desire of a country to be acknowledged. It's the desire of a president of a dictatorship to be called an elected president. But de facto, it has nothing to do with democracy. It has nothing to do with elections. And we observed this trend in the past, but I would say that these elections in 2024 were a change, really a change, when we look at the extent of these imitation, falsification, manipulation. It is really a very rude play what we had to observe in these elections.
Right. Let's talk about international observers, something your organization's recent report has significantly focused on. So what is your opinion on the credibility of these quote-unquote observers and quote-unquote experts at these recent elections in Russia?
You see, we are representing a network of citizen election observers in Europe. Not EU Europe, but greater Europe, also accession states and neighbor countries, where citizens are very active in monitoring the quality of the elections. And we have to understand that this is a whole system and there's a certain methodology. One cannot say, I'm an expert, I'm an observer, I go to the precinct, I look what I see there, and then I make a comment in the mass media. This is not how it works. This is a whole system of long-term observation. It's the system of methods which have to apply. They have to be verifiable and so on. And this is election observation. And if persons are invited for a one-day trip, for a two-day trip, and they see some precincts, maybe even agreed in advance where they will be then, this is not an independent election observation. And the threat of this sort of fake observation, the challenge is that they put the credibility of real election observation under question. So this is a movement which is part of this whole imitation game, stepping apart from methodologies of democracy and going into a sort of manipulating findings and making people believe, making the audience of a television, making them believe that there are experts who say these are real elections. De facto, they are not in a position to judge about the real quality of the elections. This is a dangerous movement, and we observe it increasingly. Trends of authoritarian states are that quality of election decreases because the status quo has to be preserved, and the intensity of bringing manipulation into the whole process increases. And fake election observation is very popular already tool to do that. And our job, our work, our responsibility as European Platform for Democratic Election is to draw the attention on that and also by that to protect the work of the real independent election observers who might be in the country, who may be active in the country.
Right, but now, so we've seen election observers coming from the Balkans, from Bosnia, from Serbia, from Germany, quite a number, from France, from Italy, mostly people associated with, you know, various Kremlin-funded organizations, media outlets, leftist groups, and so on and so forth. Many people, many observers from Africa, from Malaysia, Indonesia. How does, you know, the invitation and utilization of these quote-unquote experts and observers by Russian authorities contribute to the construction of a facade, or, you know, of international legitimacy surrounding these elections in Russia?
Yeah, the principle how it works is that either gongos, Kremlin initiated gongos, either state institutions like the Federal Chamber and the Russian Federation invite politicians, journalists, official persons like chairs of election commissions of other or third countries to come to the country for a very short time without accompanying long-term observation, just for a short-term observation, invite them to the country and to give a positive notification and positive assessment of the election process. This is how it works. And when these persons are brought to the state-controlled mass media, and they make statements, and when we read and when we research, we understand that these statements are pre-formulated, they are very similar, they point out on the quality of the elections, and they confirm that the election process is positive and well done. So this is how this a manipulated election observation works. It has nothing to do with real election observation because there's no report, there is no findings, there is no methods, there is no long-term observation. It's just a short impression of a short one-day trip. The idea and the aim is to make people in Russia, these interviews are not broadcasted internationally, and even the identity of these observers is hidden by the Central Election Commission. So we had to research the persons. So the idea is to give only in Russia itself the impression that the Russian elections are appreciated internationally, which is not the case really. But this is the sort of manipulation and imitation how this works.
Right,
and
but these actors, you know, these quote unquote observers and experts, they in fact play a role in perpetuating narratives that support the incumbent regime in Moscow, right?
Yeah, we do this sort of research for quite a time, and we have old friends who appear on each elections. They come, they are often invited, and they repeat the same phrases, and we understand that they are in a very close relationship with the Kremlin regime, and they go for fake observation missions, but they also give comments in pro-Kremlin mass media. They make comments in their country, and they support the Kremlin politics, which is aggressive politics towards not only towards Ukraine, also towards other countries. And they are part of a bigger network of international influence of the Kremlin in Europe. We observe such persons in European parliaments, in national parliaments, in regional parliaments. And very often and predominantly they come from extreme parties, either from the far right or from the far left. That's what you can quantify if you go through these people. We have to be very much aware about these phenomena because they are harming the character of elections and they are harming trust in elections.
Right, but is that even legal for a European member of a certain country's parliament to take part in sham elections held, in this case, in Russia?
Yeah, you see, there are two aspects. One is the freedom of a mandate. Politicians may travel. They may also travel to elections and make statements. but they have to do it in a proper manner. And if they do it without informing their parliament, or if they do it apart from the parliament, or if they do it and receiving money for it, this is critical. And more European parliaments come to the understanding that this is a phenomenon which they should not tolerate, because by that they harm the reputation of the very parliament they come from. And the European Parliament has made has updated its code of conduct. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has also changed the code of conduct and makes stricter regulations. And they're in a position also to sanction their parliamentarians if they go on unofficial missions of fake observation, where they give notes which are not methodologically based and which are not agreed with the parliament themselves. And this is something where parliaments have to come to.
Right. Now, how do these elections in Russia compare to those in other post-Soviet countries such as Belarus, Turkmenistan, or Azerbaijan?
Yeah, these are the most problematic countries in our network. We have members in all three countries, and they are the election observers which are the most under pressure. This is also an important aspect, but for sure, manipulating regimes do not want independent election observation. Our Russian member organization has been declared a foreign agent in this organization Golos. We have been declared in undesirable organization in Russia. So this is a way, an effort to impede and to intimidate civil society, which is caring for the free elections. So we are, by this declaration, this stamp of being undesirable organization in Russia, we cannot work anymore with our Russian colleagues. It would jeopardize them. So this tool of putting pressure on citizens who care for free elections, this is a tool we observe in all three countries. And the methods how to do that, which laws to apply, which ways to intimidate people, this is very similar in these countries. We see how the laws to intimidate civil society, they are copy and paste between these three countries, Azerbaijan, Belarus, and Russia. And what is very problematic is all three countries are member in the OSCE. They have committed to fair elections. They have committed to international independent election observation from the OSCE. And this is not the case. These countries do not stick to their commitments, neither to accept and to accept independent observation through the citizens, through citizen election observation in their countries, neither through international independent election observation. Instead of that, they build up these facades, this imitation of election observation. And this is a trend. This is already a whole system, and it's dangerous because it undermines trust in elections. It undermines also the trust in the international institutions as OSCE. And these countries, they are still members in the OSCE.
Right, but is there anything that the OSCE can do, in a way to sanction these member states?
The OSCE itself is not sanctioning in that way, but it is the participating states in the OSCE who should care for the integrity of their elections. The OSCE is a consent-based mechanism. It's quite complicated to put such strict decisions through there. But still, the OSCE is very much aware of the problem, because it's the functioning of the OSCE is also impeded by that. So therefore, the OSCE has a strong interest in maintaining the quality of elections and of election observation. At the same time, it is up to the participating states who have committed to these obligations.
Right, but if there's no way you can coerce participating states to do something about their election systems, and what is the point of the OSCE in general?
There is for sure a point in the OSCE. They make monitoring, they make recommendations, and they bring them to attention of the participating states. That's how it functions. They make these monitoring reports with election observation missions, and the reports have to be taken into consideration by the participating countries. The question in how far this can be sanctioned is a question which goes to constitution of the OSCE itself.
Right, exactly. Okay, you know, when I was looking through your draft, your still embargoed report, I noticed quite a number of quote-unquote observers from Germany. Now, in the past, it was German leftists who had quite a sympathy for Russia and who maintained relations with the Russian Federation. Now we see an increasing number of not only German but European right-wing parties that have some sort of sympathies for President Vladimir Putin. How do you make sense of that? Is Russia using European far-right parties you know, to sow chaos within the EU, to break the existing consensus on various issues? Tell us more about this.
Definitely, this is the case, and there are more and more investigations, and this is very important. Independent journalists, they investigate about these connections, and in Germany, and we must say that we reveal more and more of these connections, also financial connections between the Kremlin and the far-right parties in Germany. And we understand that, let's say, election observation is like an entry door to make these first contacts. Invite some persons from politics, have them in the country, have talks with them, make some agreements with them. This is how it works. And by that, it's getting to set up such an influential network. And Russia is very, very active in that. And the fake election observation movement lays the ground, I would say, for such pro-Kremlin networks. And it's very important to research which obligations are there, which connections are there, how much they influence the politics, whether there are obligations also of financial nature. This is something which has really to be tracked. This is important to work on that, so we understand which interest is pursued by these politicians.
Right, and now as we move towards the end of our interview, I want to ask you one more question. You talked about how these elections were held in occupied parts of Ukraine, in the Donetsk region, Lugansk, and also in Crimea. So what are the implications of voting occurring in Ukraine's occupied territories, including for those non-Russian citizens who went there to observe?
From the Russian side, it's an effort to fix the annexation. There has been this also disputable and illegal referendum that these oblasts, that they are now part of the Russian Federation.
Right.
And by holding the elections there, the Kremlin wants to confirm this is really Russia now. And this is an effort, a political effort to confirm this is now our country. Right. Which is absolutely unacceptable. And if we understand, if we learn from our Ukrainian partners and colleagues how the elections are conducted in the occupied regions in Ukraine, we understand that this is an additional tool to put pressure on people, to intimidate people, to understand who is voting, who is not voting. We know cases where people refrain from voting, they don't want to vote, and days after they are repressed, they are taken away, their houses, they are thrown out from their homes. This is how it works in these next regions, and we understand that elections are misused as an additional tool to put pressure and to intimidate and to harass persons there.
Right.
This is, yeah. So.
Yeah, and finally, very briefly, what actions can democratic states in the European Union, or governments take in response to these issues that you have identified in your report and generally throughout your work?
We should be aware that elections is one of the main challenges. We understand elections are main challenge for the dictatorship. We are afraid of the elections because they would overthrow these regimes. So we understand that everybody who cares for elections does something very important and something very important for the society. And we have to be aware and care for our elections right in advance. We have to understand that they are conducted in a proper way, that persons who care for elections are protected, that they are human rights defender, as the UN has declared just recently, that election observers are human rights defenders. And we have to understand that citizens who care for their elections should be protected, should be supported, and that parliaments should never participate in actions which are aimed to undermine free elections in other countries.
Right. Stefanie, it was such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much once again for your time.
Yeah, thank you also. Thank you very much.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?